The first shot cracked the morning open like a blade through fabric. Dust leapt from the road inches from her boot, sharp and final, and the platoon froze, not because of the gunfire, but because she didn't flinch. She stood where they had told her to wait, helmet loose, rifle lowered, marked as a trainee by a strip of faded tape on her vest. A mistake, they had thought. A liability. The desert heat pressed against her skin, heavy with oil, metal, and old sand. She tasted copper in the back of her mouth and knew with quiet certainty that this was the moment everything would turn. Someone laughed nervously behind her, the kind of laugh that tried to deny fear. Another voice snapped at her to move back, to stay in her lane. She didn't answer. She was already counting angles, already reading the silence between shots, already seeing what the others had missed. They had treated her like an afterthought since dawn. Assigned to carry extra water, told to watch and learn, spoken to slowly as if competence might slip through cracks in the air if words moved too fast. She absorbed it all without protest. She had learned long ago that arguing wasted oxygen. Respect in her world was never given, it was extracted under pressure. The desert stretched wide and indifferent, dunes rippling like frozen waves, the sun bleaching color from everything except blood and rank. Somewhere ahead, beyond the low rise, an unseen enemy was testing them, probing, patient, confident that confusion would do the killing. The platoon's formation wavered, a subtle loosening, men shifting weight, fingers tightening on triggers. Fear had a smell, sharp and sour, and it mixed with sweat and dust until the air itself felt brittle. She remembered the call sign they had assigned her weeks ago, spoken once and then never used again. Desert Serpent. It had earned a few smirks, a joke about something small and easy to step on. They hadn't known why she chose it. They hadn't asked. In the quiet of her own mind, she felt the old calm slide into place, the one that came when danger stripped life down to essentials. Breathe, observe, decide. The shot had come from the ridge to the east, angled low, disciplined, not random, a lure. She saw the faint disturbance in the sand where a second shooter had shifted, saw the way the wind carried sound just enough to lie. Her pulse slowed. The world narrowed. She stepped forward before anyone could stop her, boots crunching softly, and raised her hand, not in command, but in warning. The platoon leader opened his mouth to bark at her, irritation flaring hot and familiar. He saw only a trainee out of place, a potential court-martial waiting to happen. He did not see what she saw, the pattern forming, the trap tightening like a patient fist. Another shot snapped past, closer now, and the laughter died completely. Silence fell, thick and accusing. In that silence, she acted. She shifted the radio from her shoulder, fingers steady, voice low and precise. She spoke the call sign once, quietly, like a key turned in a lock, Desert Serpent. The name carried weight she had paid for in nights without sleep, in drills that ended in bloodied knuckles and broken skin, in choices that still woke her at dawn. The channel crackled. Somewhere, someone listened. The response came not as noise, but as movement. The men around her felt it before they understood it, a change in posture, in focus. She guided them without raising her voice, pointing out lines of fire, dead ground, the lie of the land. Her words were sparse, almost gentle, but each one landed with certainty. When the ambush finally broke, it was swift and brutal, the desert swallowing the echoes as if it had been waiting. The enemy scattered, leaving behind nothing but churned sand and the metallic tang of spent rounds. The platoon stood stunned, breathing hard, eyes tracking her as she lowered her rifle again. No one laughed now, no one spoke. Respect settled in the quiet, heavy and undeniable. Later, when the sun dipped and the heat eased its grip, the platoon gathered in the long shadow of their vehicles. Faces were drawn, eyes rimmed red with dust and adrenaline. The leader approached her slowly, the way one approached something powerful and unfamiliar. He did not apologize. He did not need to. He asked her how she knew. She looked past him, back to the ridge, to the place where death had almost reached out and touched them all. She thought of the instructors who had tried to break her, the teammates who had underestimated her, the countless moments of being unseen. She answered simply, because the truth did not require decoration. She had learned to listen to what wasn't said. She had learned that danger announced itself to those willing to be still. That night, as stars burned cold and bright above the desert, the call sign spread in low voices around the camp. Desert Serpent. It was no longer a joke. It was a warning. The platoon slept lighter, safer, knowing that among them was someone who moved without noise, who struck only when necessary, who saw the world as it was rather than as it should be. She lay awake, staring up at the sky, feeling the grit in her hair and the ache in her bones. She did not feel triumphant. She felt resolved. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new doubts, new chances to be underestimated. She welcomed them all. In the desert, survival favored those who waited, watched, and struck with purpose, and she had never been anything else. The desert did not sleep with them. Even as the camp settled into uneasy stillness, the sand whispered under the night wind, carrying the memory of gunfire and near mistakes. She lay on her back, rifle within reach, eyes open to the stars that looked sharp enough to cut. Around her, the platoon breathed in uneven rhythms, bodies exhausted but minds restless. Respect had shifted toward her, yes, but trust was slow, heavier. It always was. She understood that better than anyone. Trust was not granted for a single moment of brilliance. It was tested again and again, often when no one was watching. Before dawn, the order came down quietly. A recon sweep through a cluster of abandoned structures half buried by dunes. High risk, poor visibility, the kind of mission where arrogance got people killed. When assignments were read out, her name landed at the bottom of the list again, paired with the least experienced fire team. No one said it out loud, but the message lingered in the cool morning air. Yesterday did not erase today. She felt no sting, only a familiar tightening behind the ribs. Being doubted was an old companion. She packed her gear with methodical care, fingers brushing the worn edge of a knife she'd carried longer than any rank insignia. As they moved out, the desert shifted colors, gray bleeding into gold. The ruins emerged slowly, walls gnawed by time, doorways yawning like open mouths. The platoon spread, boots soft against sand, breaths shallow. She moved at the edge of the formation, senses tuned to small wrongnesses, the way a shadow bent too sharply, the way the air felt trapped in certain corners. Her team watched her now, not openly, but with sideways glances, measuring. One of them nearly stepped on a pressure plate disguised beneath rubble. She caught him by the vest and pulled him back without a word. His eyes widened as understanding hit, fear flushing his face pale. She released him gently and kept moving. No lecture, no judgment. Survival was lesson enough. Inside the structures the air grew stale, thick with rot and old smoke. Each step echoed faintly, sound magnified by tension. She felt the platoon's nerves fray as minutes stretched thin. Then she noticed it, the absence of debris where debris should have been, the deliberate neatness of a corner too clean, a kill zone. Her mind mapped it instantly, lines intersecting where bodies would fall. She raised her hand again. This time, no one argued. Orders rippled outward in hushed urgency, positions shifting, angles correcting. When the trap sprang, it failed, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. The enemy revealed themselves in confusion, expecting panic and receiving precision instead. The exchange was short, brutal, decisive. Afterward, the platoon leader stood in the doorway of the ruin, staring at the neutralized threat, then at her. The desert light carved harsh lines into his face. Something fundamental had shifted behind his eyes, not admiration, but recognition. He understood now that her calm was not luck, not instinct alone, but discipline forged under pressure. He asked her to brief the platoon, not later. Now, the words carried weight. She spoke sparingly, explaining patterns, not plays, teaching them how to see instead of what to shoot. They listened, truly listened. By the time they returned to camp, the sun was high and unforgiving. Sweat traced paths through dust on their skin. Someone passed her a canteen without being told. Another adjusted formation so she walked closer to the center. Small things, real things. The call sign surfaced again, not whispered this time, but spoken plainly. Desert Serpent. It no longer froze them in disbelief. It steadied them. She felt it settle over her shoulders like a mantle she had never asked for but was prepared to carry. That evening, as the horizon burned red and the desert cooled, she allowed herself a single quiet breath of satisfaction. Not pride, never that. Just the knowledge that when the moment demanded clarity over ego, silence over noise, she had answered. Tomorrow would test them again. It always did. But now, when danger coiled unseen beneath the sand, they would look for her, not because she demanded it, but because she had earned it. The third day began with tension so tight it felt woven into the air itself. Intelligence had arrived thin and unreliable, the kind that forced commanders to gamble with human lives. A high-value target was rumored to be moving through a canyon corridor before nightfall. Narrow walls, limited extraction, perfect for an ambush. The platoon prepared in silence, checking gear, tightening straps, each man wrestling privately with the knowledge that mistakes in a canyon echoed longer and killed faster. She felt the weight of their glances now, no longer dismissive but searching. They were beginning to lean on her presence, and that realization sat heavier than any pack. As they advanced into the canyon, shadows climbed the rock walls, swallowing heat and sound. The space pressed inward, stone close enough to scrape knuckles. She moved near the front, senses stretched thin, every breath measured. The desert here smelled different, cooler, mineral, old. She noticed how the birds had vanished, how even insects were absent. A silence like that never came naturally. Her pulse slowed as memory surfaced, training layered over instinct. This was not a corridor of passage, it was a throat waiting to close. Halfway through, the first explosion shattered the stillness. Rock and dust tore through the air, flinging bodies sideways, the concussion slamming breath from lungs. The platoon scattered, scrambling for cover that barely existed. Shouts rose, raw and panicked, then fractured as more blasts followed. Smoke thickened, acrid and choking. In the chaos, the platoon leader went down hard, leg pinned, blood dark against pale stone. The chain of command snapped in that instant, and with it came a dangerous vacuum. She did not shout, she did not rush. In the center of the violence, she became still, her mind cut through the noise, assembling fragments into shape. The explosions were timed, not random. The shooters were elevated, relying on panic to finish the work. She moved low, touching shoulders, grounding people with brief, precise commands. Her voice carried calm like a steady hand on a racing heart. She repositioned teams, redirected fire upward, turned fear into focus. When someone hesitated, frozen by the sudden nearness of death, she met his eyes and held them until he breathed again. The fight stretched, brutal and close. Stone chipped under rounds, dust coating skin, mouths, eyes. She reached the platoon leader, worked fast, ignoring the tremor in her own hands as she sealed the bleeding and freed his leg. He tried to protest, to reclaim control, but she silenced him with a look that brooked no argument. In that moment, leadership was not rank. It was clarity, and clarity was hers. When the enemy finally broke, retreating into the maze of rock, the canyon exhaled. The silence afterward rang louder than the explosions had. Men slumped against stone, chests heaving, faces streaked with grime and shock. The platoon leader looked at her from where he lay, understanding written plainly across his features. He spoke the call sign aloud, steady and formal. Desert Serpent, not as a nickname, as authority. Extraction came late, slow and careful. As they waited, she walked the perimeter, ensuring no threat lingered, senses still sharp despite the exhaustion pulling at her bones. She felt the weight of what had nearly been lost and what had been found. The platoon watched her differently now, not just with respect, but with trust forged under fire. She felt it settle deep, something fragile yet unbreakable. As night reclaimed the canyon, stars appearing in thin slivers above the rock, she allowed herself to sit. The desert air cooled her skin, carrying away smoke and fear. She did not think of recognition or future assignments. She thought only of the quiet moment when chaos had demanded a decision, and how she had answered without hesitation. In the canyon's shadowed throat, Desert Serpent had not struck with venom, but with precision, and it had been enough. The aftermath lingered longer than the fight. Back at base, the canyon still clung to them in small ways. in the stiffness of joints, in the distant look behind their eyes, in the way silence now carried meaning instead of discomfort. Reports were filed, wounds cleaned, gear repaired. Official words tried to contain what had happened, flattening it into timelines and coordinates. But among the platoon, a quieter reckoning unfolded. They had seen how quickly order could collapse, how easily fear could seize the reins, and they had seen who stepped forward when it did. She returned to being unobtrusive, almost invisible in. She cleaned her rifle with the same patience she had always shown, ate without ceremony, slept lightly. She did not remind anyone of what she had done. She did not need to. Leadership, she knew, was proven not by how loudly it announced itself, but by how naturally others followed when it mattered. Still, the base felt different now. Conversations paused when she passed, then resumed with care. Questions were asked, not challengingly, but openly. People listened when she answered. Days later, a briefing room filled with stale air and tired faces. The command staff sat stiff-backed, eyes sharp with evaluation. She stood alone before them, recounting the canyon in measured detail. No embellishment, no self-defense, just facts, framed by understanding. When it ended, the room stayed quiet. One officer studied her for a long moment, then asked why she had acted without waiting for orders. The question was calm but heavy with implication. She met his gaze without defiance, because hesitation would have killed them. The truth settled into the room like dust after a blast. The decision came swiftly after that. Reassignment, official recognition. A correction of records that should have been right from the beginning. When it was announced to the platoon, there was no cheering, no applause, just nods, acceptance, relief. The platoon leader approached her afterward, movement still stiff from healing. He thanked her, not as a superior, but as a man who understood how close they had come to losing everything. She inclined her head, receiving it quietly. Gratitude was heavier than praise. It carried responsibility. On their final patrol together before rotation, the desert greeted them with deceptive calm. The sun hung low, painting the dunes in amber and shadow. The platoon moved smoothly now, formation tight, awareness shared. She walked among them, no longer at the edge, no longer marked by tape or assumption. When they paused on a ridge, she scanned the horizon, seeing nothing and everything. The desert would always test them. That truth did not change. What had changed was how they met it. As they turned back, someone behind her murmured the call sign, not out of necessity, but habit. Desert Serpent. The words no longer froze the platoon. They steadied it. She felt the weight of the name, not as a burden, but as a reminder of what restraint could achieve, of how precision could save where force failed. The sun dipped lower, and the desert cooled, vast and indifferent as ever. She walked on, composed and watchful, knowing that respect earned in silence endured longer than any shout, and that when the next moment came, she would answer it the same way she always had,